we have an amendment coming up in November, Amendment 3, which would legalize recreational marijuana. And quite frankly, I am 100%, and I don't care who's listening to this, against it, because we've seen the results.
We remember back in the 60s and 70s, they were saying that marijuana was a gateway drug.
Right.
And they did all kinds of studies back then every heroin user started with marijuana.
Right.
So they called it a gateway drug. And that doesn't mean if you use marijuana, you're going to be a heroin user, but it certainly greatly increases your chances.
Right. And the difference between then and now is the amount of THC in marijuana. Okay. I label it a little differently, and I'm not scientific at it, but back in those days, 60s and 70s, it was a mental addiction. But now with the amount of THC in there, it becomes more of a physical addiction. So in order to get rid of that, you've got two things you're working on. And that makes it far more difficult. And then we're finding with the fentanyl crisis that they're putting fentanyl in everything. So the people that are pro Amendment 3 are saying, well, you'll get clean marijuana. But it doesn't stop the DUIs that are going to come from marijuana. It's not going to decrease gateway. It's going to increase gateway. So we will have more people involved with it.
Hey folks, this is Thaddeus with Mike here in the studio, the Flagler Voice Podcast Studio on the Road to Recovery podcast, which is here every week where we get to talk about the Flagler County Drug Court Foundation that actually sponsors this show. Mike has a very special guest on this week. Mike, you have the ball.
Thank you, Thaddeus. I appreciate it. Yeah, my special guest was one of the people that got me heavily involved in working in the world of recovery here in Flagler County. His name is Mike Grenier. And when I got involved with the Flagler County Drug Court, Mike was the drug court coordinator. And I spent a lot of time with him. I learned a lot because when I got into the program in the beginning, I knew very little. I can tell you over the years, and particularly I changed a lot of my thought processes. I learned a lot. And that's one of the things that we continue to do with the Drug Court Foundation, is going out in the community to educate them so they don't come back with the same kinds of thoughts that I might have had when I first started getting into the program. So Mike, welcome. I'm glad you were able to make it today. I hope you're going to enjoy this time together, because what I want to do is pull from you your background, your history, what got you involved, what was it like being the drug coordinator, what were your duties, how did you handle it, all these kind of things. So now I'm going to shut up and let you go.
Well, thanks, Mike. Nice to be here. Nice to see you again. I came from a background of law enforcement. I started my law enforcement career when I was 18 years old, and I did just about 32 years in law enforcement field, working for two different departments. The second department, I was actually there 29 and a half years, and I retired. I was second in command of that department. And when I retired, I enjoyed my retirement for about a year and a half, and then I got bored and had to find something to do. And the job as drug court coordinator came up, and I applied for the job and got that. And did that for about 11 and a half years. And it was by far the best job that I've ever had. I really enjoyed doing it. I learned an awful lot. It was quite a transition from law enforcement and locking them up, and pretty much having the attitude back then is, why don't you just stop using? What's the big deal? I mean, I think everybody has that feeling initially when they hear about people that are involved in drugs or drug addicts or whatever. Why don't you just stop? Well, it's not that easy.
No.
And well, you know that from working with drug court as well. But it's a learning process, shall we say?
It sure is. It sure is. So, what were the main duties of the drug court coordinator?
Well, when I started, Judge Hammond was the drug court coordinator, the drug court judge, and he used to call me the drug court director. That's what he referred to me as, because it was a new program. Really, it just started. Drug court started in December of '06, and I got hired in July of '07. So it was just starting out. We had very few participants when I actually came into the program, and one of the the drug court team itself is the prosecutor. Of course, the judge. The judge is really the leader of drug court. So the judge, the prosecutor, public defender, treatment, probation, the drug court coordinator. But the other thing was law enforcement at the time really wasn't involved. So again, knowing where law enforcement, what it was all about, I went to all the law enforcement in the area, the sheriff's department, the Benell Police Department, Flagler Beach Police Department, and spoke to the chiefs and the sheriff there and explained to them about drug court. It took a little work to talk them into it because they felt like I did, like, why don't you just quit? Most do. But they ended up assigning each one of the departments, assigning somebody to our drug court team. And particularly Flagler the Flagler Beach Police Department assigned Detective Liz Williams. And talking to her afterwards, actually been in a while, she said that was the last thing she ever wanted to do. But once you got into the program, there was no way you were going to drag her out of there because she enjoyed it so much.
She was one of the leading people in helping the Drug Court Foundation get founded also, and participated in that for years.
Right.
We still keep her posted. She still sends us people that she think might be good for drug court. So she still does referrals for us and stuff like that.
And it's good to get that because
Yes.
as these people got arrested, and I would always go through the arrest logs, see who got arrested and for what they got charged with and so on and so forth. And it was good to get the input from the law enforcement officers because they knew these people pretty much on a personal basis.
Mm-hmm.
So you could reach out to the law enforcement officers and say, hey, you arrested so-and-so. What do you think about drug court? And more often than not, you would get absolutely, person could really use it.
Yeah. And I saw that result because of many of the graduations, I'd look in the back and there's an officer. He wasn't on the invite list that we sent out, but he was an officer that participated in the arrest of one of the graduates, and it was there to see the success that happened after that.
Right.
So yeah, they care.
And you get, every once in a while you hear of a success story. Certainly we had a lot of successes. I had one girl that graduated a few years back, and she would text me occasionally what's going on and what she wanted to do. She wanted to become a nurse.
Mm-hmm.
She wanted to know the procedure for getting her record expunged. So I put her in contact with the state's attorney. She did get it expunged. She actually got her certificate for RN. The last I knew, she was working in an ER.
Yep.
So there's a huge success story.
It was
Without
incredible because I remember her myself while she was in drug court, and it wasn't a smooth ride.
No, absolutely.
Okay, it was not a smooth ride, but she got convinced, and the team and the people that surrounded her and the people that she got involved with were all encouragers.
Right.
And then she took that encouragement and ran with it. And I know, and you know, because she kept in touch with both of us. She got kind of worn out during the schooling part. She was she wasn't used to that prior to this. And here she is an RN and an ER nurse. Absolutely incredible story.
Well, you kind of alluded to it. You've heard this over and over again about you got to change persons, places, and things.
Yep.
And that's extremely, extremely important. The people that if every time you and I got together, we'd go use, guess what? I can't hang around with you anymore. One of the more obvious ones is, if you're a drinker, you can't go to a bar. And
right.
Obvious things change in person, place, and thing. But when it gets really difficult is when that other person you were using with is a family member, a spouse in particular.
Yep.
So how do you change that? That takes a little bit more work. You may not want to change, to leave the person, but you got to make some changes in your life.
Yeah, the success in those areas happen predominantly where both make the same decision at the same time. But all that has to happen is one of those people in that relationship to fail and brings the other one down real fast. So it needs a lot of, it's most difficult. And you and I have both seen that many of those relationships start off fine and don't make it. And the ones that do, again, you can see how hard they worked at it to make that success, and what a blessing it is when we see it.
Well, the thing is, when you're in recovery, a lot of people meet another person while they're in drug court, start a relationship. We would always try to tell them, don't start a relationship while you're in recovery. while you're in recovery, the number one person you have to be concerned about is yourself.
That's right.
And if you're starting a relationship with somebody else, they want to be number one in your life. They can't be. You have to maintain you as number one and work on you, not work on somebody else.
And everybody out there has to understand that doesn't just relate to people in substance abuse and recovery. All their lives, if you want to be a helper, you're going to make sure you're ready, you're fit to be the helper, whatever it is, whether it's raking the lawn or helping somebody in recovery. If you're not ready, if you're not healthy, you're not going to help them.
Right.
Oh, yeah. I can remember sitting with a couple, and I'm not going to use any names, and sitting in the benches right outside the courtroom. A couple was starting a relationship, and I sat there. I said, you can't do this. I mean, I can't tell them you can't, but I tried to tell them they can't. It's just not where you are in recovery. It's not going to be good. They didn't listen. They went through that, they got married, and then get divorced, and they both have suffered relapsing and that kind of stuff. So you got to stay away from it.
The drug court's a lot of work.
Yep.
But if you really want it, it's worth working for.
Yep.
And one of the things I'm sure you always heard, I've heard all the time, is when people really get into recovery, they just say, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Oh, yeah.
And that is so true. They're using all the time. And everything is about using. No matter what you do in life, using this comes number one. And they pretty much come up with, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And now they got to move on. What do I do to correct it? And some people get it first time around. And as you know, some people don't. They've been through the program 2 or 3 times.
Yep.
And you look at the statistics on it. Not everybody gets it in the first time. Usually 3, 4, or 5 times even.
I think 7 is the actual the number.
It keeps growing.
It keeps growing. But if they keep trying, that's a key.
Yes.
It's not failure. You know, when somebody, we have what we call clean days in drug court. And if they foul up and they use, because of the drug court program, we have to remove those clean days and have to start those days again. But I keep telling them, I said, we have to do it because it's the drug court program and you have to participate and do what the contract says you're going to do to finish it up. But don't lose the fact that you gained all those days successfully before you fouled up. Look back and say, I did it, I'll do it again. I will get there. And if they have that attitude, they will.
And you're right. Well, I was a drug court coordinator. There's a lot of people that almost ready to graduate, and they would use, and they would lose all those clean days. You have to have a certain amount of clean days in order to graduate. And I would sit down and I would talk to them. What happened? Because it gets to the point where you think they intentionally sabotaged themselves.
Yep.
And as it turns out, they did. And one of the things I would hear was, it scared me. What do you mean it scared me? I was doing so well. I was feeling so good. I've never felt like this before. It scared me. And it doesn't make sense to most people. But when you look at it from their perspective, it makes a lot of sense. You know, and you got to look at, you got to look at it from another person's perspective.
Yeah, we've talked to some of our participants that you could see it starting to happen. Fear of getting out of drug court, not having the oversight that they needed, that they felt they needed to keep going. And we tell them, if you don't feel you're ready to graduate, we won't push you out. We're one of the few drug courts that doesn't have to do that. But more often than not, they won't accept that. They will self-destruct, and they will stay in the program longer under those conditions. We had a gentleman just recently, he was 1 week away from graduation, or less. And he fouled up a little bit, and it put him off. Couldn't graduate that day. Well, he was in the graduation list. So it happens, and we see it happen. But then I look at this young fellow who did that, and he's getting there. He will graduate in November, and he will make it. And I look at, and I'm sure you did, and I'm sure the judges do, you look at them when they come in, and you see the difference and the changes in them when they go out, and they get to that point. It's amazing.
One of the biggest things that I remember, and I'm sure you do too, is when most people that start using, the first people that they, quote, abuse, steal from is family.
Yep.
And you see them go through drug court, and the family, the mother, father, come to you and thank you for giving them their child back. I mean, it just speaks volumes. And because again, they're the first people they steal from.
Right.
And a lot of times we've had a few that the parents are the one that actually press charges to have them arrested for a felony. Now that's a big step. Have your own child or grandchild or whatever arrested for a felony so that they can get help. And but that's happened quite a bit. We know that.
Yeah. Well, and on the opposite side of that, we have parents, because they love their kids, try to help them in the wrong way.
That's true.
Okay, and keeps them in it longer, though they think they're doing the right thing. They're not. And getting them educated has been part of, I'm sure, the drug court coordinator. So you meet with the parents, have an opportunity to talk to them about those kinds of things, I'm sure.
Well, what parent won't help their kid as much as they can, but it gets to the point where you're not helping them, you're enabling them, you're helping them, through into their addiction, not out of it, into it. And to have that conversation with the parents several times, that you would sit down with them and say, well, when he does this, what do you do? And the reaction is like, why? Sometimes you have to educate the parents as well.
Definitely.
And that's a big part of it.
Yeah. So when you all out there in the audience are listening to what drug court does and who it affects and who's participating in it, the official participants are those that have been inducted into the program. Okay. In other words, and how that happens, they get offered to come into the program, and once that offer is made, if they accept it, they're sentenced into drug court for a period of time for the program. But the family, they're not sentenced to it. But the team is still there to work with them in any way we can to help them, because we know that's an overall thing. If you can get, and you, like you said, the first people that substance abusers go after and steal from and do this from it is usually family members. So they're sometimes the first ones that the bridge has been cut and fallen down, and rebuilding it, and you got to rebuild it from both sides, and getting the parents to understand what was causing it. They weren't dealing with the kid that they knew. They were dealing with the disease of substance abuse that was causing them to do things that they thought never happened.
And some people, quote, legitimately get into drug addiction. When I say legitimately, if you have some type of a sports injury, say, and they put you on painkillers, and you take them like you're supposed to, but you end up getting addicted to it. How many times have you heard stories like that? Sad stories. And then if, they start taking them off the drugs and they don't, for whatever reason, don't wean off properly or whatever the case may be, now they go out and start seeking their own drugs. And we've had those come through the program as well.
Yeah. Well, you'll hear, the audience will hear a story about that coming up. We had a gentleman here that we recorded who had a severe automobile accident when he was 15. He's now 31 or 32, and he's only been clean for a year. And he tells his story, and it was the same thing. It was the painkillers that got him. They couldn't get away from him. They didn't monitor or correct whatever. And now you should hear him, because he hasn't had even an aspirin in over a year. And he tells the story that he's never felt this way, because from age 15 to 31,
right?
That's a long time. And from a very young age, so he really missed his youth. Right. Now, so he's doing tremendous. So yeah, those stories are not uncommon.
Hear them all the time, unfortunately.
And in the early days in Florida, until a few years ago, we were the pill state. So it was not unusual for Florida residents to end up that way.
Well, there was stories how they would charter a plane out of Boston, fill the plane, send a plane to Florida, and send all the passengers out to buy drugs.
Right.
And then they get all the drugs that they needed, fly back to Boston. And they made a fortune. Think about that. How much money that cost just to fly down here, to pay those people. But they were making billions of dollars.
Yeah. So that's part of it. That's part of it. And they were coming from Boston, but we had enough people here in Florida that were taking advantage of that force system at the same time. And thank God we've changed that. That's helped. I'm going to speak outside of this thing. We have an amendment coming up in November, Amendment 3, which would legalize recreational marijuana. And quite frankly, I am 100%, and I don't care who's listening to this, against it. because we've seen the results.
We remember back in the 60s and 70s, they were saying that marijuana was a gateway drug.
Right.
And they did all kinds of studies back then every heroin user started with marijuana.
Right.
So they called it a gateway drug. And that doesn't mean if you use marijuana, you're going to be a heroin user, but it certainly greatly increases your chances.
Right. And the difference between then and now is the amount of THC in
Right.
marijuana. Okay. I label it a little differently, and I'm not scientific at it, but back in those days, 60s and 70s, it was a mental addiction. But now with the amount of THC in there, it becomes more of a physical addiction. So in order to get rid of that, you've got two things you're working on. And that makes it far more difficult. And then we're finding with the fentanyl crisis that they're putting fentanyl in everything. So the people that are pro Amendment 3 are saying, well, you'll get clean marijuana. But it doesn't stop the DUIs that are going to come from marijuana. It's not going to decrease gateway. It's going to increase gateway. So we will have more people involved with it. Mike Feldbauer's personal opinion. I speak for myself and myself only, but that's what I see. Yeah.
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah. So as we go on, getting back into the drug court program itself, how did you meet with the participants on a regular basis? What was the program like? What's the coordinator's job?
Well, when they first come into the program, this program, when I first started, it was phases 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we added another phase 5. When they first come in, I met with them every week, at least once a week, every week. They were in front of the judge at least once a week. And then as they get into phase 2, it was like every other week. And then phase 3 is every third week, so on and so forth. So when they come in, it's much more strict. They had to meet with probation every week. Treatment programs go to 2 or 3 times a week. So when you first come into the program, you're just getting accustomed to it. They feel really overwhelmed. They have to do so much. And it's true, but we give them a calendar. Now, on Monday, you got to do this at a certain time, and then Tuesday, we actually physically hand them a calendar so they can keep it, right there at their fingertips. And then I'm sure after that, they put it on their phone so they have it. So it's very, very strict. And like I said, as they get through the program, phases 1, 2, 3, and 4, it would change a little bit. And we get into phase 5, it was termed, it's when I was in there, waiting for graduation. So you're still doing your treatment. You're still going to see the judge once a month, and so on and so forth. Now, again, if you backstep a little bit, you fall a little bit, we may put you back another phase and then increase the therapy a little bit more. So even though it's set up in these 5 phases, dependent on the person and how they progress, how they do, you can actually be put back a phase to give you a little bit more, hands-on, if you will, as far as treatment goes.
All right. Well, that sounds reasonable. We talk about that in the program, there are attaboys, okay? And then there are sanctions that come up. How did you deal? What were the sanctions that some of the participants that would go through, and how would you deal with it?
Well, we always come up with different ways in which to do things. And we're always asking people, what's a good incentive? Because everybody's different. Mm-hmm. And what incentive works for you may not work for me. And the same thing with, if you mess something up, it's not going to be the same for you as it is for me. It has to kind of remain the same for everybody, but you can still, tweak it a little bit here and there.
Tailor it.
Absolutely. Because everybody is different. I mean, one of the incentives that we'd give people if they were on the A team, we'd give them a candy bar or something when they come up in front of the judge. Didn't sound like much. When they graduated from the program, we'd give them some type of a token. Remember years ago when I first started, Judge Hammond, being a football player, I come up with this idea of coming up with these little footballs. And it said drug court on him and he would actually throw them to them from the bench. I think maybe he got more out of it than the participants did, but it worked out really well. Everybody wanted a football. I want to graduate. I want a football. And then we did it with like a key ring. But again, doesn't sound like a lot to your normal person, but that's something that they really wanted when they left there. And the reason they come up with the key and the keychain because they could always have it in their pocket. They could put their hand in their pocket and just remember where they came from, where they were, and how they progressed, and where they are now.
That's cool. That's excellent. And even today, we still do those things. Graduation, they get the little charm, they get the little like coin with and a key, a reminder of what they've been through, and they can still do that. And we still use the candy during general court sessions. So we have in the court we have A team and B team. A team is you've done everything between now and the last time,
Right.
done it you're supposed to. B team, you might have missed something. It doesn't have to be major. It could be you missed a meeting or something. But A teamers all get the opportunity for a candy bar. And then we have what we'll call a bowl. And if you have made A team and with A team and incentives, which means you've done more than you needed to do, you've been more helpful to other team members, you've gone out and done a whole lot more. You get a couple of incentives in a row, you get to draw from the bowl, which usually has a gift card or something in it. So there's always some incentives in there. And though the candy doesn't seem like a big deal, they've proven that that is a big deal. Because when you put your hand in there, pull that candy out, and you go back to your seat, and the B teamers out there and they're not getting it, trust me, they're thinking about it. Not the value of the but it's the fact that you've been recognized.
Right, that's it. I was going to say it's the recognition.
Yeah,
Right.
that's absolutely cool. Well, Mike, it's been a super pleasure to have you here. I'm glad we've had the opportunity to get to know each other. We don't get to see each other like we used to.
Sometimes life gets in the way.
Yeah, it does. It does. I don't know if you're riding anymore, but I've stopped riding this last year.
I did as well.
And we used to get together to do a little two-wheeling, but we don't do that so much anymore. But again, I learned a lot from you in the program because, again, you were my weekly you were my contact. I'd be there on Wednesdays where we'd meet and talk about participants, what they were doing as you were rating them for A team and B team. And we go from there, and then we put together so we could present to the rest of the team so they could see what was happening. So then the judge would get all this information and be able to make some decisions on how we're taking care of those participants. So it's been good.
It was great to have you in the program when you first started. It was the first time that we had somebody like that to come in, and you would come in full force. I mean, you were really into it, and the participants saw that, and it's like they looked up to you as a father. They always reached out to you.
Yep.
I know you'd have even meetings at your house and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So
we did a lot of that during COVID when they canceled most of the meetings for participants. My wife said, go ahead. So we had meetings at my house 4 nights a week. And then when everybody left, we'd take the bleach out and clean everything up just in case, make sure it was done. But those people, and at that point it was just the guys that I had over, they had meetings they couldn't go to, and if they didn't have those meetings, and I'm not saying we did anything special, but if they didn't have something to go and talk to and work on, they could have gone down the drain.
But the foundation has done a lot for drug court, and,
Yep.
and you in particular. But I remember that you had a mechanic,
Yep.
and their cars would break down to work on their cars or their motorcycles or their bicycles
Yeah.
or whatever it took.
Yeah, bicycles now, we have the bikemen of Flagler. They help us out. So if somebody needs a bike or repair a bike, they'll take care of it for us. That particular mechanic has since passed away, but we do have another mechanic now. Somebody that's gone through the program is a good mechanic. So we still will help them with car repairs and those kinds of things. GEDs, we pay for the GED, we pay for the testing if they need it. We help them with a variety of things that the court can't do for them.
Right.
And that takes a lot of the burden off of them so they can concentrate on their recovery. And that's our desire.
Well, the success of the participants has a lot to do with you and the foundation,
Thank you.
because they have that support,
Thank
and it's extremely, extremely important. Because if not for you and the foundation, a lot of these things wouldn't get done, because the county and the state can't pick up the tab for it. So it has to come from other places, and that's certainly the work that you put into
Yeah.
it.
And to be noted that the Flagler County Drug Court Foundation, up to very recently, was the only nonprofit organization that worked specifically with another county organization, the drug court. That was our function.
Right.
And that's always been a good thing, because it's got to be a combination of the community and government. It can't be all put on the shoulders of any of them one way or the other. It's got to be worked together.
The nonprofit, when it was started when I was in there, and I got the idea because St. John's actually they had some major problems with it. I don't even know if it's still running now, but that's what gave me the idea, and it's about having the right personnel in there to actually run it.
Yeah.
And that falls on you.
Well, it falls on me now, but I'm the voice. I might be the face, but without the rest of the team, I'm nothing.
Well, that's a team. There's a whole team.
There's a
thing.
whole team out there, and they work real hard at what we're doing. You know, we've taken on Narcan, major Narcan distributor. We got it into the Flagler County school system. So, looks like we're coming to an end. For now, maybe we'll have you come back some other time in the future. We'll appreciate
happy
you
to.
spending the time with us, and I do appreciate all the time that you were the drug court coordinator. So again, thank you, Mike.
Thank you for
Have
you
a great day.
for your input into the drug court.
Okay.
Hey, folks, you guys have heard about the impact that the Flagler County Drug Court is having in the community. Myself and Mike, we come from a perspective that started from law enforcement, and we were just part of locking people up. But now to be on the other side, to be connected to Drug Court Foundation and how they are helping to keep those people from going back to jail is fantastic. And the improvements just in the community in general. So this has been the Road to Recovery podcast with myself and Mike here at the Flagler Voice. And again, this show is sponsored by the Flagler County Drug Court Foundation, which is helping their participants to excel. And again, Mike is always looking for people that want to donate to the Flagler County Drug Court Foundation because your donations help with the effort. So remember, Club 100, he's looking for 100 people to donate just $10 a month. That can make a huge impact in their fundraising efforts. So again, this has been Thaddeus and Mike on the Road to Recovery podcast, which is hosted here at the Flagler Voice Podcast Studio. We'll see you next time.